Amen.
Recently, I was driving in my car. I'll be honest, the windows were down and I was singing. Two cars were in front of me and they were hauling. I was trying to keep up, not gonna lie. And all of a sudden, their windows go down and out comes a fist and one finger. The other guy driving, he too reaches across the passenger and he lets the person know how he feels about that other person. Fist, middle finger. This guy goes, "Oh, I can up you," begins to kind of drive with his knee and allows the two fist salute. We come to this red light and I find myself just fascinated, very, very curious. My wife would say it's nosy, but I'm curious about what is going on. And all of a sudden I start to hear screaming, yelling. Just curse word after curse word. The light turns green. The two cars just spin their tires, take off. And one guy in front of me takes a metal water bottle and chucks it, hitting this nice German luxury vehicle. They're going, and this car just makes a hard right after he throws this metal water bottle. So me, being a pastor who's nosy, curious, I end up following. And I'm just wondering, what's going on in this guy? What would cause someone to chuck something at a nice German luxury vehicle? What's happening within them? And I begin to think, God, maybe I need to follow this person wherever he's going. Doesn't matter if it's Jewel Osco, doesn't matter if it's their house. Maybe I should just follow up and just see. I'm starting to pray, just asking God for some clarity, for some wisdom. When I look in my rearview mirror, and what do I see? A nice German luxury vehicle hauling. And all of a sudden, it passes me. We're now in a residential area. The car in front goes through a stop sign without stopping. So does the nice German luxury car. And I begin to just say, I wash my hands of this. Now, let's just play this out for a moment. The first car, maybe he drives home, parks in the driveway. What do you think the nice German luxury vehicle does? Just parks right behind it. Does he get on out and go, come on, let's hug it out. Let's hug it out. The snuggle is real. The snuggle is real. Like, no. You think the guy gets out and goes, hey, can I just pray for you, brother? Can I just have a moment just to pray? No. What does it happen? You find there probably going to be more screaming, more shouting, more cursing, and most likely a potential altercation. Honest question. When someone's lost their composure, have you ever seen it actually turn out well? No, it doesn't seem to ever turn out well. I was at a nice little ice cream shop. I love ice cream. Mint chip, cookie dough. It doesn't even matter that I'm lactose intolerant. I'll eat it anytime, anywhere. I'm like in line ordering, and I look outside, and there's this adorable family of five. And they're just eating, laughing. This 5-year-old kid's got a little cone, a little bit of sherbet, and he takes a lick, and as he licks, the whole scoop falls down. And I just remarked, sherbet down. And it's on the ground, and then I'm indoors, and I can hear the parents just turn on this child. You're such an idiot. What's wrong with you? You can't even eat some ice cream right. Why are you always messing up? We're trying to have this good time, and you mess it up. That's what you do. And so this kid, in his moment of innocence, tries to pick up the scoop of ice cream, thinking that if he could put it back on the cone, he might calm his parents down. And as he picks it up, one of the parents slaps his hand and goes, "What are you doing? That's dirty. You're so dumb." I'm sitting here just brokenhearted. And so I just asked the woman who's kind of serving up ice cream, I'm like, hey, can you get me 2 scoops of sherbet ice cream? And let's put it in a big waffle cone. And she puts it in, I got my 2, and I just decide to walk outside. And I go up to the little man, and I go, here you go, buddy. I saw what happened. And the kid's eyes wide open, looks at me, and I go, don't worry. And I'm kind of not sure if I'm gonna join the family conversation. Curious or nosy, I don't know, So I take a lick of my ice cream, and what happens? 2 scoops. And in this moment, the first thing comes to my mind to say, "You gonna yell at me too?" I did not say that. I kept my composure. And this kid just smiled. His eyes got big. And then he looked at his parents and got a little bit nervous. And I just looked at him and I said, "All the cool kids drop their ice cream." And I just walked away. And but what is it about our culture? I mean, there's so much negativity. It's so easy for us to get triggered, isn't it? We just say the first thing that comes to our mind. We don't even care if we hurt 5-year-olds or even people who are driving nice luxury vehicles. I'll tell you what, we do live in some unique times. Negativity, all-time high. A lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of shame, a lot of stress. It's just causing many of us just to lash out. We say whatever we think, and we really don't care if we hurt people. You know, Paul had these words for his mentee. A pastor of a local church in the city of Ephesus, this guy by the name of Timothy. He was a young leader, and inside the church, there were all these factions that were beginning to rise up. There were people who didn't like his leadership, they didn't like his teaching. There were some people outside the church who said, "You know what, why is he talking about resurrection? Why is he talking about Jesus?" They began to buy into other philosophies. And then there were just other people who didn't like what God was doing through that church and just began to kind of spit lies and venom, just these toxic words. And the truth is, timid Timothy had become deeply intimidated by people. Fear was beginning to win. It was beginning to hold this man's life in check and suffocate the greatness and the goodness and the image of God that was put and placed specifically within Timothy to shine within the city of Ephesus. And so Paul writes these words in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 5. He says this, "But you, Timothy, keep your head in all situations. But you, Timothy, keep your head in every circumstances." I love how one person translates this. "But you always keep your composure." Another one says this, "But you, Timothy, be steady in every circumstances." Probably my favorite translation comes directly from the Greek, and it says this, "But you, Timothy, always be sober-minded." Always be sober-minded. I grew up where alcoholism was a part of our family kind of story. And my mom began taking me to AA meetings at a very young age. My first meeting, I think, was 4 years old. And I remember my mom telling me that people would ask the question, "Hey, is anyone here for the very first time?" And I raised my hand at 4. But there was this thing in our family where alcoholism was a part of it, some struggles. And you know, if you've had too much to drink, what that can do to your mind. Your inhibition is gone. Everything looks beautiful. You feel a sense of freedom that you've never had with your tongue. You kind of have a little bit of a stumble, a smile, something to your step. And you know what? You just aren't fully there. And this is what Paul is trying to tell Timothy, that your mind, hear me friends, your mind can actually get off kilter. That's what fear and anxiety and shame can do. It could be singular focus, but the stress and the anxiety, the fear and the shame, it can actually take your mind off kilter, and you could actually not see things so clearly. And so Paul is telling Timothy, no, have this sobriety of mind, free of any kind of fearful distraction. Have this sobriety of mind, this singular focus to keep your mind centered and focused on what truly matters. And that is what God has invited you specifically to do. And that's to lead the good news, the gospel, the church here in Ephesus. But you know, many of you work in hostile environments. There's the negativity, the eye rolls. You experience it in the marketplace, maybe even in your schools or in your neighborhoods. There's some of you who are teachers in public schools. And your faculty, the other teachers, the administration, they know about your faith. They don't buy it. And to be honest, they kind of question you for it. They might make little statements under their breath. They might wonder, are you going to pray about that? They make little statements here or there. And all of that negativity is going to go somewhere. Some of you, it's in the marketplace. And you're the only follower of Jesus in your company, or maybe on your team, or on your floor. And people are watching you. And when all of that hostility, all of that negativity, all of that opportunity of evil for fear to win and drive out the goodness that God has put inside of you, oftentimes we lose our composure. And friends, when this happens, let me tell you, it's a big deal. Our integrity is on the line. Our character is on the line. Our relationship with Jesus to others is on the line. And this is why Paul stresses, but you, Timothy, keep your head in all situations. I love trying to kind of create some examples that maybe can relate to many of you. I love the NFL. I love college football. It's only a few weeks away from it beginning. Praise Jesus. And there was this commercial that came out for Beats. It's kind of like this headphone company. And it starred a NFL quarterback, Colin Kaepernick. He plays for the 49ers. And he and the 49ers are showing up to play the Seattle Seahawks. And the bus shows up. And the Seahawks fans, who are known around the league as being some of the craziest, unruly fans in all of the NFL, are there, and they've got some things to say. Watch how Colin responds. Love that. Quick question. When all of that hostility comes, what are you listening to? Wouldn't it be amazing if you could just put on some headphones, and even though all those people are saying those things, you actually had something to turn back to? The way that commercial ends is you see Kaepernick getting off the bus, and people are still just screaming and yelling, and he just walks straight towards the tunnel because he's singularly focused. He's sober-minded. His whole thing is about game time, and none of these voices are going to get in his way. The poets and the prophets and the preachers of the Hebrew Scriptures, they use this phrase verse after verse, and it was simply this: give thought to your ways. Think about why you do what you do. Spend some time wrestling and considering, why do you say what you say? Why do you act the way that you act? This was crucial to people who were walking closely with God, to give thought to why you are living the way that you are. Chuck Swindoll says simply this: life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you choose to act. Think about that. 10% you can't control. It's just life happening to you. People saying things, you not getting promoted, you getting fired, you getting a medical disease, you having a child, you engaging in a relationship. 10% life happening to you. The other 90% is how you consciously choose to act. The truth is, people who keep their composure, they've learned how to master this. In the 90%, they don't find their brains getting off kilter. They are sober-minded. They have composure. They don't let fear win. Now, if you begin to study different scientists or anthropologists or sociologists, a lot of work is being done on the brain. I've read a number of books recently, and they say some fascinating things about the way that our brains work. Our brains, when we find ourselves entering a difficult situation, it's gonna do two things. Number one, it's gonna look for old patterns. Old ways in which we've done things. Old ways in which we've acted when the negativity has come. When the fear has come, the old patterns that feel familiar. But the way that our brain also works, and the way that God has beautifully designed and wired us, is that we find ourselves wide open to a new way, to a new possibility, to a new opportunity. So that when the negativity comes, when all the hurtful words come, when fear wants to reign supreme in your life, you actually have the chance to learn another way. And today, I want to teach you the 4 principles of how you can train your brain. How you, in the midst of hostility, in the midst of negativity, in the midst of fear, anxiety, worry, and shame, how you can prevent your brain from getting off kilter, and how you can handle yourself with a kind of composure that Paul begged Timothy to have. The first thing that you need to do is you need to understand that every one of us, every day, will be triggered. You gotta know your triggers. A trigger is simply this: whenever you feel threatened, whenever you feel like somebody is trying to take something from you, slight you in some capacity, fashion, or form, when you find a desire that you have being taken, you find yourself getting triggered. And it's important that we, as Christ's followers, can actually recognize our triggers, that we can give thought to what's happening within us. A trigger is simply this: when blank happens, I feel blank. I'll give you an example. Whenever my wife and I and our kids, we go out for a few hours on the town, my wife will have a sippy cup for my daughter, she'll have some fruit snacks for our son, and she'll have a Cliff Bar for me. About 90 minutes without food, she can see my demeanor getting a little bit crankier. And I will hear the sound of a Cliff Bar opening. It doesn't matter if I'm driving or walking, she will just open up the Cliff Bar, doesn't even say a word, and just kind of puts it right into my mouth. And it's a symbol, it's a sign that I have become a little bit what she would call hangry, hungry and angry. Just she has made one word. So when hunger happens, I feel angry. You gotta know that. You all have triggers. If you don't know them, ask your friends, ask your partner. They will tell you what they are. Now, kind of deeper, maybe you say, when failure happens, I feel afraid. And failure happens. I feel afraid that I might lose my job, or I might feel afraid that I might lose this relationship. I feel afraid. You have to understand your triggers. If you are going to master the way of keeping your head in every situation, recognize, name your triggers. Now, let's take it a little bit farther. About 12 years ago, someone came and spoke at the summit, and they used this example that gave me a lens into how to understand this. And he said that whatever the distance or gap is between expectation and reality, this space, whatever that gap is, that's where pain or frustration or angst lives. And you think about that. You come home, you gotta take the kids to soccer practice, and in your mind, you think that the kids are going to be ready, shin guards and all. They've been fed, they are dressed, they are ready. And you're running a few minutes late, but you have this understanding and expectation that the kids should be ready. And the reality is, they're not. And all of a sudden, that little gap triggers you. It triggers you. For many of us, our triggers come because we want to be in control. And when our control is threatened, our desires are threatened, here it is. And let me tell you, friends, how you respond to this gap is deeply connected to you keeping your composure. The first thing that you have to understand is how to train your brain is you got to recognize your triggers. You got to recognize them quickly, name them quickly, understand them quickly. Can you do that? Do you know, like, the top 3 triggers, the things that are just going to unsettle you, have the potential to take your mind off kilter, the things in which you're allowing your brain to receive fear and anxiety and the lies? Recognize those triggers. Number 2, to how to train your brain, you must refuse false stories. It's amazing is when you have this little gap, the kind of stories we can tell about that gap, right? Oh, they don't respect me. They don't love me. They don't see me. They don't notice me. They've always not noticed me. And all of a sudden, what tends to happen for many of us is we take this small, little gap and we blow it up with a false story. How many of you are really good at telling false stories? You tell yourself that the other person's a villain. You might even tell yourself that, oh my goodness, I'm just so helpless, nothing that I could have done, why? Or maybe you make yourself out to be the victim, and all you do is you tell yourself this massive story. You must work really hard to refuse your telling yourself a false narrative. I like how it's said in Psalms chapter 10, verse 4. It says this, in his pride, the wicked man does not seek him, being God. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. There is no room for God. When you have this space, this angst, this frustration, it triggers. When there is no room for God, you will tell yourself false stories. You will not make space for God's goodness, God's love, God's grace, God's mercy. You will not make room for God, and you will allow your emotions and your feelings to take over. It is almost impossible to keep your head in all situations when you declare yourself to be the head of all situations. What we must do is learn to define reality. Is to almost step back and kind of observe what is going on in me. What is really happening here? Why would this person do this? Why would they say this? Did they understand my expectation? Do they really understand how I am feeling? And until we can define reality, we're going to feel stuck. We must make room for God. And by defining reality, you slow it down and you go, God, well, what's really going on? You get curious. You begin to kind of lean in. God, what's really happening inside me within this space? What's really, really going on? How to train your brain. Number 1, you got to recognize your triggers. Number 2, you got to refuse false stories. And number 3, you got to respond well. If you define reality and you refuse telling false stories, you have the best chance to respond well. But most people don't respond well. They choose to react. And there is a big difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is when our feelings and our emotions, the fear, the anxiety, the stress, the worry takes over and we just lash out. We lose our composure. We can't keep our head in that situation. But when you learn to respond well, you've actually been able to refuse the false stories. You've been able to define reality. You've been able to really make room for God, and you can respond accordingly. I often think of this thing that I call a 10-10-10 rule on when I'm thinking about responding and how to deal with kind of whatever this gap is. I say 10 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10-10-10. If someone cuts me off when I'm driving, we've all experienced it. I feel threatened. They put my family in danger. I give them 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Oh, why do you do that? I'm glad I'm okay. It's probably maybe he didn't see me. I don't like it when people don't see me. I'm glad nothing happened. You know what? Grace. And then I stop thinking about it. 10 seconds. I don't drive up really close behind them and flash my high beams. I don't try to go up behind on him, cut him off, and then go really, really slow. I don't take out my metal water bottle and throw it at his car. 10 seconds and let it go. Respond well. There's other things that aren't going to be 10 seconds. You're in a meeting. You're in a conversation with your family. You have this moment where you say something and their response feels like there's a little bit of sarcasm directed towards you. And it's not just once, but it's 2 times. And then you say another thing and they kind of give you that face where they're nodding, but they're just like on their face, they're like, I don't like you. But I agree with you, I don't like you. And you're like, what's going on? You know that this is going to be a little bit of a conversation. So you know what you do? You go, hey, can I just take a couple moments? I just got to ask you a couple questions. And you get clarity. You don't create a false story. You don't allow fear to win. You don't allow stuff just to spiral out of control. You don't villainize that person. You don't make yourself the victim. You don't make yourself helpless. You respond because you have made room for God, and you respond well. And within 10 minutes, you get to hear, oh, it was nothing about you. Or you know what? Actually, I felt like you were slighting me. I was slighting you? Oh, I didn't even know that. And you have this conversation that after 10 minutes, you walk away stronger and healthier. It's crucial. 10 seconds, 10 minutes, but there's also some things when you get triggered, they're gonna take 10 plus hours. And when I say 10 plus hours, I think of the things that are gonna bring me to my knees, make me open up the scriptures, open up a journal, and begin to reflect. Why does this keep triggering me? It's gonna bring me into conversations with my mentors, with my small group, with my spouse, and with my counselor. It's gonna be 10 hours of hard work. And the truth is, oftentimes we see the things that